most recruiters now and companies are going to ask, what are your salary expectations? And at the end of the day, right, this is important because even if you act like it's not on your mind, it's on everyone's mind. We want to get that cash. We want to get paid well, right? That's what we're there for. But what happens is typically the recruiting team is trying to get that information to see where they can place an offer and to see if they want to bring you through the process, right? So the risk, if you share a number that's too low, maybe you're basing it off like your current pay, right? But your current pay is different than the industry you're going into or the level that you're getting considered, right? So if you show out a lower number, you might end up lower on their pay range with a non-competitive offer out the gate, or they might even down level you.
So Brandon, welcome to the show, my man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Trevor. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. I'm excited too because I've got a big audience of career changers, okay? And listen, they're trying to level up, okay? We're trying to get some more of this greenbacks, this cash flow, okay? We're trying to get a little bit more stacks, and that's what you help people to do. So I appreciate that. Can you tell me where this started and how you came to find out that you're the guru in all of this? How did that happen?
Absolutely. So it's kind of a funny story. So it actually started about 12 years ago when I was graduating from undergrad. I was actually in my negotiations class, and we had like a little small topic on negotiating salaries. And I started to receive job offers. And one of the ones I got was from American Airlines. And so I got the idea of, hey, I'm going to go ahead and try negotiating this, see if I can't get some more. Even though I'm an undergrad with not a lot of work experience, probably won't get anything, but it's for a professional negotiation role, so it probably makes sense. And if I do well, I can turn it into my end of the year project. So I ended up going through the negotiation. I have no idea what I'm doing, but I scored a big sign-on bonus, a base increase, and 60,000 airline miles. So as a kid coming out of college, I was able to do a huge trip to Ecuador. So it got me pretty pumped. But when I turned it into my negotiations professor, she actually turned around and said, this is great. Actually, someone else in the class got a job with American. You should help him. So I helped him do it. It was successful as well. And then when we actually started at American, it was a cohort of professional negotiators in this role to negotiate on behalf of the airline. And I found out that out of the 20 or so people, we were the only two that negotiated our offers. Everyone else assumed that they didn't have any leverage. Yeah, it was nuts, right?
Well, let's talk about that. Hold on. Let's dissect that. I always like to kind of pull things apart, and I'm sure that's probably what you did. So first, you just kind of went in and you just did it. But was there something, a common, like what did you do? Like, let's dissect it. What did you actually do inside of that process to help you to negotiate that extra cash flow?
Yeah. So, I mean, back then I had no idea what I was doing, but I would say the key thing that I did is I just at least asked, right? So I tried to be as professional as possible because I was in that mindset of, shoot, I'm about to graduate with no job. I need this job. So I'm going to put my best foot forward, but also advocate.
I'm going to give you a mic drop for that. Hold up. I'm going to give you a mic drop. The just ask. Just ask. It's so important. I was speaking with somebody just yesterday, and he was like, no, you shouldn't ask. And I was like, no. Like, I literally was like, look, ask and you shall receive, right? Ask and you shall receive. And if you're not asking, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So you're missing. It's definitely a no if you don't ask. So I love that.
Absolutely. I mean, if you don't ask, you're not going to get it. And what's the worst case they say is no, but more than likely they'll say yes. And then you're in a better position.
Yeah. Okay. So you kind of stumbled in and you just asked. What did you ask for? Do you remember?
Yeah. So I just asked for a base increase. So I had no idea about compensation at the time. I was just used to that number that I received in my daily paycheck. So I didn't know there'd be other items on the table. So I asked for like a decent base increase. And then I was surprised that they came back with also a sign-on bonus and the airline miles.
Oh, so you asked and the cup runneth over.
Yeah. Honestly, it's like, well, we can't do that much, but we can give you X, Y, and Z. And I think that's kind of what opened my eyes. Wow, there's a lot more to this than just a quick win on a base salary.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. So you then did it for someone else. Okay. You helped another gentleman to negotiate. And then you found out you were the only two out of how many?
Out of about 20 people that were hired.
20 people.
Yeah. We were all hired to essentially be professional negotiators on behalf of the airline as they try to exit bankruptcy. So it's kind of shocking.
Wow, that's pretty crazy. Okay, and so was it something similar for that other gentleman, or was there something different that a different approach that you went after with the other guy?
No, so I honestly did the same approach because at that time, really, I just knew what worked. So I went for that. But then really where I started to improve the strategy is obviously we started talking with the cohort to brag about like the big trip we did and the extra money we got. But what ended up happening is I started negotiating friends' salaries as well as like colleagues as they started to depart the airline until like 5 years in, it was friends of friends, and a lot of people until about 6 years, I decided to kind of perfect my craft and build it into a business.
Love that. Okay, so what do you think are then some common myths about job offer negotiations, like things that we need to debunk right now? What are some common myths about it?
Absolutely. I mean, especially when it was coming out of undergrad, right? I had a bunch of those myths and fears because I hear it from my clients all the time. Is one of the big ones is, hey, they're going to outright refuse, which you and I just chatted about, right? The worst case they could say is no, but more than likely you're probably going to be in a better position. The one I hear a lot too, which is pretty silly, is I don't have leverage to negotiate, which, as you can see, is even with like the cohort of professionals at American Airlines, they all thought they didn't since they were undergrads. But my buddy and I guess we proved them wrong. And it continues to be that case because when you actually start to think about it, right? When you get a job, that means that you've passed all their check marks and they're like, shoot, we want this person. Like, we want you in this seat. We're going to do whatever it takes to get you in this seat. Otherwise, we're going to have a hiring manager that's ticked off because we have to find someone new. And then it's more work for me as a recruiter to go hunt them down.
Yeah, they want to close the deal.
Exactly, right? And they want their ideal candidate. So you do have leverage to have these conversations, whether you have another job offer or not.
That's fair right there. I mean, think about it, guys. You went through that whole gauntlet experience of going through the ATS and then getting through to the recruiter and then getting through the screening calls and getting through all the personality assessments and getting through all of the interviews, and you beat out everyone else. Heck yeah, you got leverage, right? You went through they made you jump through so many freaking hoops. You already know these companies nowadays, man, they make you like a circus. What is it? What do they call them? Circus monkey or something like that? They make you jump through hoops.
Yes.
You know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Shoot, man, you better ask for something.
You win as well. And I mean, the thing is too, is think about the recruiting team. That recruiter is the one who set up all the meetings, met with the hiring team, debunked all that stuff. At the end of the day, I mean, they don't want to go through all that process again. So they want you.
That's true. Now, okay, let's talk about maybe some pitfalls. Okay, what are some big mistakes people make when negotiating? Because, okay, yeah, they want me, right? And then I do what? And I blow the whole thing. Is there something, have you ever seen that where it just blows up in their face?
I do. I've seen it usually two different ways, right? So the first is usually people think they're negotiating and they share like salary expectations or their current salary early in the process, which is a big no-no. And then the other one.
Let's talk about that. Hold on. I want to dive into that. So you think going over your salary expectations early in the process is a no-no. Tell me more about that. And then what would you recommend someone to do when money comes up? Because it typically does come up. So what would you recommend somebody to do in that scenario?
Yeah, and it's definitely going to come up. So I'd love your opinion on this as well. But to be honest, is most recruiters now and companies are going to ask, what are your salary expectations? And at the end of the day, right, this is important because even if you act like it's not on your mind, it's on everyone's mind. We want to get that cash. We want to get paid well, right? That's what we're there for. But what happens is typically the recruiting team is trying to get that information to see where they can place an offer and to see if they want to bring you through the process, right? So the risk, if you share a number that's too low, maybe you're basing it off like your current pay, right? But your current pay is different than the industry you're going into or the level that you're getting considered. Right. So if you show at a lower number, you might end up lower on their pay range with a non-competitive offer out the gate, or they might even down level you, which is pretty common with some of the big tech companies. But the other side of the coin, right, is if you're like, oh, well, I'm just going to say a lot of money and that's going to get me a very competitive offer. They might be like, shoot, hey, Trevor, we can't afford you. we're going to go in a different route. We're going to start interviewing everyone else because I want them to accept, because my goal is to get somebody in this seat and not get to a point that doesn't work out.
So do you recommend a range then, to give a range? Because it's also kind of like, if you don't say anything, then that kind of comes off as a little bit shady. I was listening to JT O'Donnell. I'm sure you might be familiar with her. She's a really big career coach, and she was talking about, like, imagine you were to go in to buy a TV, and you go to the salesperson and you're like, oh, I like this TV. How much is it? And they're like, I'm not going to tell you that. Right. So it'd be like, huh? So it'd be kind of shady. So do you recommend, like, to give a range? And then also, where do you recommend people go to figure out what their value truly is in the marketplace?
Yeah, absolutely. So rather than giving a range yourself, right, the recruiters know how much they can fill the role at. They should know the range. Even a lot of companies have started, or a lot of states have made it a requirement to be more transparent in the pay. So really, when you get that conversation, because you should know what you're getting into, I wouldn't say they're going to necessarily give you like the truthful amounts, but it's better to actually turn that on the recruiter and ask them for the range, because then it's that same situation, right? You're the one buying the TV. You're the one that wants to work there. Why wouldn't they tell you how much they're going to pay? So actually switching that around and saying, hey, what's like the base salary range and the total compensation range that you're looking to fill this role at? That's going to have them put out some numbers rather than you running the risk of just being way off. And then you can determine if that's like the right route and the right role that you want to continue interviewing with.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, I think that, to me, and this is why I asked you the question, to me, I would rather get that conversation out early and make sure that we're both on the same page as far as the range goes, right? Like, nothing will be worse than going, 5 rounds of interviews, getting the offer, and then figuring out you're not even in the ballpark, or somebody's just off their rocker, you know what I mean, on either side, and that happens, and it's a big old waste of time. And so it's, I know there are a lot of, this is an interesting conversation, because I've heard both sides of the argument, right? Where maybe you don't want to go over it early, and maybe you do want to wait till later, and vice versa. So tell me your thoughts again on that. Like, why would someone want to wait till later on in the process to get to that? Is it because you would prefer them to sell their value and really, make the employer want them, or talk to me about that?
Yeah. So I honestly don't see a reason to wait, to be honest, to have that conversation, because at the end of the day, you're just getting more information. If you're not sharing your salary expectations and you're just trying to understand what their ranges are, it shouldn't matter when it happens in the process, because then you're just gathering facts, right? Because during an interview, you're usually interviewing the role and the team to see like if it's the right fit for you, and one of that's going to be compensation. But more so, kind of the strategy negotiation wise is not to think you're negotiating by salary, sharing salary expectations throughout the process, because you won't usually get the full picture until you get that job offer, right? Start finding out about the benefits. Oh, shoot, there's a bonus, there's equity, there's sign-on perks. There's all these different things to where if they're like, oh, the base salary range is X to X, that's not going to give you enough details on kind of what the overall picture is.
Right, yeah. If they just say it's between 80 and 100, and you're like, okay. But what about the 401k, and what about the insurance, and what about the this, that, the health benefits, and all everything else that go, the total comp, right? That's super important, because a lot of people just look at the salary and they're not looking at the total comp.
Yeah, you call that one of the biggest things that I see is people focus on the base salary, which it makes sense, right? This is what we get every month in our paycheck, maybe biweekly. But at the end of the day, right, if we're thinking about growing wealth, as we increase in our career, our compensation gets a lot more complex. We start to get bonuses. We get equity, hopefully. Maybe we get like an initial perk, like a sign-on bonus. And that's your overall total monetary take-home pay, or your total compensation, that we really want to focus in on. So when asking for ranges, right, it's a base salary and total compensation range. It should always be in mind.
I also heard of somebody, I can't remember for the life of me where I heard this, but I've been doing this show for a long time, and there was a career coach who recommended to negotiate your severance package in advance. And I just thought that was so impactful because, a lot of these roles now are 3 to 4 years. Like that's the average tenure on a job is 3 to 4 years. And the reason for that is because you have stock owned companies. And when the stocks are good, doing well, they're hiring. And then when stocks are going bad, they're firing. They're doing big mass layoffs. And so the average tenure of a job is like 3 to 4 years nowadays. And so knowing that chances are this isn't your forever job. You're going to be there for 3 to 4 years. Knowing that, like, why not negotiate your severance package in advance? Like, hey, when you lay me off, because I know you're going to, right? 3 to 4 years from now, when you lay me off, I'm going to need a big old fat, severance package. What do you think about that approach? Have you ever heard of that?
But no, good call out on severance packages. We typically mostly see those negotiable with like higher level roles, usually when you start to get closer to the executive level. But at the end of the day, right, it goes back to when you mentioned earlier about like, hey, if you don't ask, you don't receive. That's an item that you should be asking once you get the offer, just in the due diligence phase of like, hey, do you guys have a severance package? Obviously, I'm planning to be here for the long term, but if we ever need to part ways, like, how does that look to make sure I'm not kind of left out in the dust?
What do you think about asking the question, maybe in the interview process, when the last time they had, major layoffs was?
Yeah, I think it's fine. It's because essentially that's like a probing question, right? You're trying to understand the culture of the team, how they treat their employees, how they make it work. Anything that's swirling in your mind that's making you nervous. I mean, you're interviewing the company, right? Let's get that out of the way. Let's ask before you kind of jump in and accept and find out, shoot, I don't think I'm going to be here for the 4 years I planned.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, like I see it all the time. And what you were talking about with the senior level executives and things like that, the executive roles, that's primarily the market that I work with. And they're dealing with age discrimination and a lot of things to get back to work. Once you get a 5 in that number, and matter of fact, even in the 40s now, there's discrimination that comes into play, and it's tough. It takes those people longer to get back to work, and so I always recommend, like, hey, that might be something to look for in your next negotiation, is to talk about that severance package just in case, because it's probably going to happen. Just saying. So, okay, let's talk about some steps for negotiating. Okay, and going through that job offer and negotiating some more cash flow. What would you like? Are there some specific steps that you outline for people?
Yeah, there definitely are. So we have about 5 steps that I typically recommend that I've definitely proven over the years compared to what I was doing back in college on my first role. So we might have to break these up a little bit. But the first one, it goes down to like understanding your total compensation and like what's included in the offer, right? So I mentioned it earlier, but really understanding not only what your base is, but actually breaking down your total compensation. So taking your base, your bonus, if there is one, your equity that vests per year, as well as a sign-on bonus or any other incentives, and charting that out so you have a full picture, right? That's the number one step, regardless of where you are in the career, that you should be evaluating. The second step that I think a lot of people miss, but as we discussed earlier with asking questions of why it's so important, is if you don't ask, you don't know what's on the table. So the second step after you get the offer is what I call the due diligence phase, and I guess asking strategic questions, but it's where you actually review the job offer package that they give you, also the benefit package, and typically come up with a list of questions, not only that are on your mind of like, hey, what do I need to know before I move forward? But also ask for items that you don't see. Hey, I've had this at my current company. I should ask if they have that. I've seen this at other company. Is there a reason why you guys don't offer this? That way, if they're going to give it to you and it just takes asking one simple questions, you secured that, you knocked that out of the way. Now, when you send over a counteroffer, you don't have to focus on those items. They're no longer trade-offs. Now you can start to see anything that they missed, including your comp. So that's like a huge step that I suggest most people don't miss rather than just throwing out numbers. But the thing that kind of the third step that everything really centers around is what I would call is the total compensation research, or just the compensation research in general. Because depending on what company you're at and the size is, they usually have an HR team they typically have a base salary range and a total compensation range for every role and position and level. So if you can actually do the compensation research by using resources like PayScale, Glassdoor, Built-in, Comparably, a few of those, you should be able to actually find in your market for that specific role what their pay range is. That way you can actually see, hey, where does my initial offer sit? Is it on like the low end, the mid end, or the high end? And realistically, how much room is there to push? That way, when you're crafting your counteroffer, you're essentially pushing for something that's realistic, and hopefully you're not leaving anything that's on the table. And then the fourth step's obviously wrapping that up into a counteroffer strategy on how you're going to propose that to the team. And then the biggest step where I see most people fall short is being prepared for pushback. So at the end of the day, they don't call it a negotiation for nothing. The recruiter or the hiring team's probably going to come back with some no's, some pushback. So actually being prepared for those conversations, so you know what to say. So if they say this, you say that. If they say that, you say this, just to make sure you keep it kind and professional, but it's targeted so your concerns actually make it back to the decision makers.
I love that. So handling those objections, because you know that, most likely you're going to get some. A matter of fact, let's put it this way. If they just said yes to everything, then you left money on the table. You should have asked for more. I mean, really, if they just are like, yeah, sure, absolutely, we'll do this and this and this. Damn, I should have asked for more, right? Like I didn't ask for enough.
It's funny. I end up talking with people way too late. They contacted me after they tried negotiating and they're like, well, I just asked, I said the offer was like too low and they threw these numbers out. Or I shared like, hey, it might be nice if it was this, and they just matched it. Did I do okay? I was like, well, did you do any compensation research? How do you know if those numbers are good? They're like, no, I guess I did it. And I was like, well, you probably undershot yourself, unfortunately. So
yeah. Well, okay. So I love that. What do you think about timeline? Okay. How long should someone negotiate their offers? Is there a point where you really don't recommend somebody goes past? Is there a time for this?
That's a great question, and not one that I've talked about too many times on podcasts, but there really is timing, right? Timing in any negotiation is important. Usually it works in your benefit to work through something quickly because it shows you're actively interested, you're working towards accepting or creating a deal that works for everyone. So I would never recommend sitting on an offer for like a week and then trying to negotiate, because what are you communicating to the hiring team of like, hey, like I'm halfway in, I don't know if I want this job. Do you think they're going to kind of work with you negotiation wise, or are they going to help that person who's like, hey, I'm ready to accept. It's just, honestly, this doesn't fit my bill. So if we can work together to get this, we're probably going to get through it. But I would say on average, most of our negotiations take about 3 to 5 days. So it usually makes sense within like the first 24 to 48 hours, getting back to them with like your due diligence questions, and then kind of mirroring the recruiter's response time and how long it takes them to show that you're interested and you're working through that. Way too often I've seen people come back like a week or two later, try to negotiate, and the company's like, hey, sorry, like the offer is what it is, take it or leave it, because we need to get back to the drawing board.
Yeah. It's kind of like, it reminds me of like Shark Tank, when they go in there and the guy's asking for too much and they get into the negotiation stage, and a lot of times the sharks will just start pulling their offers. They're like, you know what, forget this, because it shows that this guy's indecisive, can't make a decision, right? There's a lot of negatives to it if you're not able to close that deal quickly. And I always tell people all the time, time kills deals. Okay. Time kills deals. And you don't want to give too much time. You don't want them to all of a sudden think, second guess, giving you the offer in the first place, and think about, well, maybe here's the runner up. Maybe we ought to give him the offer. Right. Have you seen that ever happen before, where somebody kind of dragged their feet a little too long and they pulled the offer? They're like, you know what? Never mind. We're going to go a different direction. You ever seen that?
Yeah. So I've never seen a job offer actually rescinded, but I have seen at that stage to where they say it's like, hey, unfortunately, we've given you too much time. You have until end of today to accept if you want to move forward. Otherwise, we have to move on to other candidates. So usually that's what happens, right? Is like people wait. They're like, I'm going to get this counter offer out, and the person gets him like, you've been sitting on this for a week and a half. Like, no, it's like, we're not going to make any changes. You're either accepting or you're not. Okay, you're not. We're on to the next person.
No, that's good. That's good. I mean, again, that reminds me exactly of Shark Tank, because they're like, no, I need an answer in like 3 seconds. Otherwise, I'm out. Right. Okay. So a couple other questions are, I know you have a calculator, right? A total compensation calculator on your website. Talk to me about that and what's different about that from, some of the other places that you were talking about, Glassdoor and places that people can go to figure out what they're worth. What does this total comp calculator do? How does it work? And then tell us your website so people can go find it.
Yeah. So the total compensation calculator is going to be a little bit different than like Glassdoor, PayScale, and all those. So on those, you're going to get like one holistic number of like, hey, here's what the pay range is on a total compensation basis, right? So we saw that, but it doesn't give much visibility into like what makes up total comp. So I created a total compensation calculator where essentially you can go to it and you can actually plug in your compensation, whether it's your current compensation or your new offer, and it'll let you put in kind of the name of the company, the level, your base salary, your bonus, your equity, whether it's options or RSUs, and sign-on bonus. And then also like click the years that you want to look at, as well as like the vesting schedule for your equity. And it's actually going to chart it out. So you can actually visually see of, wow, here's the money I'm going to expect it to make over the next X amount of years on a total comp basis. So you can see all those inputs. That way you're really getting like dialed in on here's what my wealth looks like if I accept this opportunity. And then from there, you can start to build out, okay, if I adjust these inputs and they negotiate on these items, that's how it's going to affect me in the long term as we start to build our long-term wealth.
I love that. And I love how you frame it up to wealth, right? Because listen, I tell everybody all the time, what's the entire reason why we go to work in the first place, right? The entire reason we go to work is this thing right here called cash flow. Okay. It's why we go to work. Okay. Now there's also, purpose and meaning and calling and, all of that. Okay. You want to like what you do. Sure. Get it. Understand. But at the end of the day, you got to pay the bills. Okay. So it's about cash flow, number one. And then, hopefully you have enough to save at the end of the day, and that you can even go to the next level, which is invest, so that you can create that wealth for yourself and create financial freedom. Because ultimately the end goal is to not have to work, right? You work because you want to, not because you have to. Okay. Financial freedom, right? That's the ultimate goal. And if you're not looking at that, right, you're missing something. You're missing a piece of it. So I love how you said that about wealth, right? Because people aren't necessarily, I find most Americans aren't thinking forward. They're just looking at the here and now, the today. So how do you get people to think bigger, right? How do you get people to, because this is a mindset thing, I think, right? To get people to know what they're worth.
Yeah. So the biggest way that we get people to think bigger is usually, since we focus on salary negotiation, is breaking down the changes and showing them that visibility of the total comp, right? Because most people, when they're moving companies, usually it's coming with a pay increase anyways. They're excited, right? They're like, great, that's extra money. But when I break it down into not only like what salary negotiation can do, but also the long-term effects to total compensation, what I try to get them to see is, hey, look, on average, our increase is sitting at about 11.8% at the moment. So say you're making $100,000 per year, that's an extra $12,000 per year. If that's $200,000 a year you're making, that's an extra $24,000 per year, right? That's $1,000 per month, that's $2,000 per month, right? Those are big changes. Now let's go ahead and compound that, right? You're making more. Now you're getting a merit increase, or you're getting a promotion, right? Boom, next year's up, right? So now we can start to look at, here's what I'm going to be making in year 2, year 3, and year that. And guess what? You're probably not going to stay maybe for 3 or 4 years. Maybe you're going to bounce to the next company, and you just increase your principal of what you're making. So guess what you're asking for next time? You're only going to change if you're making more. And that's actually how we step up and make more in our compensation long term. So kind of changing that mindset of, hey, not only what am I going to be making off the bat, but where is this going to set me up in the next few years?
Absolutely. That's a major impact that you're having there. Okay. So with your coaching, I know you also have like an online course, and you have coaching where you help people with all of this. How does that work? If I wanted to, let's say I was a job seeker, I want to work with you one-on-one, you know, or do you do one-on-one coaching? Do you help people with that, or how does that exactly work? And is there like do I give you a percentage of like the negotiation? Like, let's say I was able to negotiate, you know, an extra $50,000 or something like that. Well, how does that work?
So I do offer personal salary negotiation coaching. That's kind of our bread and butter. So we'll work with people to essentially guide them from start to finish to the salary negotiation. So in a sense, I act like a silent third party where they don't know, the company doesn't know that they're working with me, where I'll draft all the emails, I'll do the compensation research, and I'll coach them before every call to make sure that they don't hit any pitfalls. And then the way it works, at least our pricing wise, is we think it's fair to essentially get like a percentage of whatever we negotiate. That way, if they make money, we make money. And guess what? If the company doesn't move, why pay us? Our services didn't work. So at the moment, it's 7% of the incremental increase. But we have about a 90% success.
So it's a contingent kind of a deal where if you don't make them more money, then they don't pay you anything. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean,
dude, that's the way to go right there. So what this is what I say, what you got to lose?
Nothing. I mean, you're not going to get that type of return in the market. I mean, if you think about 7% of fee, you're keeping 93% of those funds over the next year, right? That's what a 15x return on your money.
Yeah. Okay. So when should someone hire you in the process? Should they do it when should someone get with you? Like in the application process, like early, or, you know, as they start to get further along in the interviews? Like at what point do you feel like is the right time or the best time to get with someone like you?
My recommendation is to reach out as early as possible, right? There's never too early. If you're going to be entering the kind of interview phase and looking at new roles, reaching out earlier. That way I can kind of help you and give you some tips before you get an offer. But the latest would be once you have an offer, right? If you start the negotiation, we can't help much, right? We're not using our strategies that have worked. But there's no hurt in reaching out early. That way I'm kind of up to date when you guide that. So then you're prepared to treat the negotiation phase almost as like part of an extra step of the interview process.
All right. So that's good. As early as possible, you need to reach out. What would you say from your experience? Because you've been doing this how long again?
For 11 years now.
11 years. Okay. In the 11 years you've been doing this, tell me a story. I want you to paint a picture for me of like the greatest, like that testimonial, you know, it's like in your head right now, that client that you worked with where you freaking changed their life.
Yeah. So I'd say I have a lot that it's like mid-career or high career professionals that made a lot of money. But I would say the biggest one that's kind of changed kind of my mindset recently is I was working with a new grad. I think she was out of office or out of university with her PhD for about 6 months, right? So she had a little bit of work experience, but she was working in a consulting role and she was transitioning essentially to a large tech company for a full-time role. And they tried to bring her in just as like a new grad, like a very standard offer. Here's what we're going to pay and all that. And essentially brought her in at that level. Yet when we evaluated, I met with her, she felt that she hit all the qualifications on the upgraded level and that she was kind of getting funneled into that. So I took on her negotiation, honestly, not knowing where it was going to end up, because typically some of the large companies don't necessarily move their levels once they get an offer. But throughout the negotiation, we were able to negotiate her a better level with the company. So in big tech, that's huge. That was one of the first ones we were able to do that. And then it came with like a 12.4% increase, which accounted to about $26,000 extra per year. And I think $84,000 over her entire package. And it was huge. Like, it was wild for both of us. She was excited. Never would have thought she was going to accept the job anyways, because she needed it and wanted to work at that company. But to be able to see like that transformation that far, like out of college, and like getting that opportunity, and it just getting so much better to set her up for success in her career.
Man, that's awesome. And what you said about needing it, I want to touch on that too. Again, a lot of the folks that I work with in career transition, they're senior level, dealing with ageism. It takes them a lot longer to get back to work. Sometimes it's a year and a half. The longest time it was of a person I worked with was 28 months. And you can imagine going through the rejection and the process and watching your bankroll go backwards and all of that kind of stuff really takes a toll on you over time. And so it can naturally feel like when you get that offer, you should just jump on it, right? Because you need it. Right. So what do you do to help people to kind of detach from that? Like, oh my gosh, I just got to take this job right now. Like, because again, it's a mindset, I think. So how do you help people with that?
Right. I mean, and that's the mindset most people are in, right? If you think about the way interviews are designed, what's your goal? It's putting your best foot forward the whole time and doing everything you can to show that you're the right one for the role. And it's a ton of work. So when you get the offer, you are still in that mindset of, hey, I don't want to do anything to jeopardize this position, right? So people quickly accept, or they've been looking for a while and they really need the job, so they quickly accept. So with the way I try to get them to change their mindset is essentially to think of the salary negotiation process as like the last step in the interview process and your chance to essentially do your due diligence, right? They just spent essentially maybe months interviewing you and taking a ton out of your time for you to sell yourself. Now it's your time to take maybe 3 to 5 days just to go ahead and evaluate the opportunity and make sure you're getting a solid offer before you work there for the next year, 5 years, 10 years, etc. Because at the end of the day, they're not going to walk away from you. The worst case scenario, they could say no. But I guarantee, even if you haven't been working for a while, they should provide you with a better offer and work with you before you start.
I love it. Right? Yeah. Don't just get so eager. Okay. Don't get so eager, like an eager beaver, right? You need to just take a chill pill. First of all, go celebrate because you got the offer, right? I know it's been a hard journey for you through this career transition. It's been a battle. Okay. Go celebrate. And then just kind of like chillax and get with Brandon here so he can help you bring in a little extra of this. Okay. Right? Like, let's rock, let's roll, let's go cash flow. That's what I'm talking about.
I mean, at the end of the day, there should be no risk of getting your offer rescinded, right? Even if you need that job, maybe you're laid off previously. I've never seen a job offer rescinded. I'm sure it happens. I've heard of stories. If maybe you're aggressive, you don't take the right approach. But at the end of the day, get the mindset of negotiation being aggressive and treat it as a step in the process where you're being kind and professional, and you shouldn't have any issues. You should be set up for success, get your confidence back, start that job.
Let's go. So what would you say, last question here I have for you, what would you say are some of the biggest mistakes that people make during the negotiation process?
The biggest mistakes. One, I would have to say, avoid sharing your salary expectations. I can't hype that up enough. Just don't do it. But that doesn't mean don't talk about compensation. Definitely quiz the recruiter, find out what the range is, both on a base salary basis and a total compensation basis. Otherwise, you have no idea what's going in, or you shoot yourself in the foot by sharing your expectations. Another mistake would be not being realistic, right? Companies have pay ranges. Make sure you understand that pay range, whether you get it from them or you do your own research, rather than just throwing out crazy numbers like I want double the salary.
That's a big one. That is a huge one. And I'll tell you, especially in the market that I serve, again, senior level executives and stuff like that, they worked their way up a corporate ladder somewhere, and they got salary increases along the way. And sometimes, right, what they were getting paid and what the market is paying for that role now is not always equal. And so they go in wanting what they were making or even more than what they were making, because they're like, well, I want to make more. And so sometimes there are unrealistic expectations for what the value of that, what the market value for that role actually is. And so that's where you're saying you need to go in, do your due diligence, do your research, make sure that you're in a range that makes sense, and you're not asking for something that's, out of this world. What else besides that? What are some other big mistakes people make?
Another mistake is being aggressive and treating the negotiation like you're at the car dealership, right? This isn't bartering, right? There's no leverage of, hey, I'm going to walk away, I'm going to be aggressive and all that. Like, you want this job, and and you're still kind of in that interview process. They don't want to find out like, shoot, is it going to be like this to work with this person? So keep it professional, be strategic, never say negotiating or that you're going to negotiate, right? Most of these conversations should be like you're talking with a friend that's helping you feel comfortable to move to that new company. And if you do that, it's going to go a lot better.
Well, that's good too. Yeah, it can't be too harsh through that process. I could see that. Someone coming off as pushy, right? And pushing their weight around and getting maybe a little bit arrogant in their the way they talk to people and stuff like that. Yeah, you gotta be humble, grateful, right? Throughout the whole process, even when it maybe you're not getting the answers you like, you still want to respond with gratitude. You don't want to respond with like, being a jerk about it. So I love that. Okay, where can the audience connect with you, right? Because again, I got a big audience of folks that are going through this, and they need a guy like you. You work on contingency, man. He ain't make no money unless you make some money, okay? You see what I'm talking about? Where do they connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the best way to connect with me and kind of check out our services would be thesalarynegotiator.com. Like I mentioned, I mean, we have both personal salary negotiation coaching depending on where you're at in your career. So I'd be happy to chat with you. Or if you want to get going early, you're welcome to check out our salary negotiation courses at thesalarynegotiator.com/courses. But I'm also very active on LinkedIn. So if you want to reach out, you have a quick question, just connect with me there, reach out, and I'll get it answered.
Well, Brandon, I really appreciate you being on the show today. Thank you for all you do for these job seekers out here, helping people level up. Okay. It's really, it's big work, man. I mean, you make a big impact in people's lives, so I just want to say I appreciate you. Thank you so much for being on the show. Keep doing what you're doing, man.
Awesome. Absolutely. Thanks for having me here. And I hope I was able to provide some tangible advice for everyone to use in their negotiations.
Absolutely. Well, guys, that's the show. It's all about who you know. Bye. Thanks for listening to the Who You Know Show podcast. My name is Trevor Houston, and if you've enjoyed this episode, consider subscribing wherever you listen and leave us a positive review to help us keep the mics on in the studio. Until next week, that's the show. It's all about who you know.